We're going to talk about a system. And this is a system that most of us are unaware of, and it's one of the reasons that a lot of leaders are suffering, because they don't realize that there is this system that's going back and forth of, it's kind of a give and take. So letter A, it's a system that we'll be discussing is a system of disclosure and feedback. And basically it's the same principle of sowing and reaping and cause and effect and give and take. So you have a disclosure, and from that disclosure you're going to get certain feedback. Letter B, we are all living and laboring within the system of disclosure and feedback. Every day we all go about disclosing things through our actions. We're constantly and every moment doing this, disclosing information about ourselves to other people. So your kid comes home with a bad report card, or you walk into a restaurant. Why'd you walk into a restaurant? Well, because you're hungry. So you're disclosing information. I walked into the restaurant because I'm hungry. Okay, we discipline our children. We're disclosing certain standards and values that we have. We're speeding down the highway. What are we doing? We're in a hurry. So all this stuff that we do is all this disclosure and interaction, and we're always disclosing information constantly. Item C, we disclose a part of ourself to the world, not with our words, but by our deeds. And that's where this becomes a system, because that's where you're not only disclosing information, but hopefully if you got some good people around you and good friends and a good partner and things like that, you're also getting feedback. And that's where they create this thing they call the system. So this disclosure of information, and you're getting feedback. Your kid comes home with a bad grade, that's feedback. You got a bad grade. Here's feedback that you're getting. Your boss gives you a raise, that's good feedback, right? You walk into a party and all of a sudden everybody stops, they clam out, it gets really, really quiet and everything. You're a pastor. So, you go home and your wife's got on those pajamas with the footies in them, and it's all the way up to here like Modest Mary. She's disclosing something to you, okay? So just go to sleep is what she's telling you. Good night. Your body language is also a huge factor for feedback. My father never had to speak to any of his children. I'm one of 9. So my father was a great guy, an incredible person. All of my brothers and I always said, if we're half the man our father was, then we'd be great. But he never had to really talk or raise his voice. He just had to give you a look. And when you got the look, you knew you were in trouble. So we'd run to the bedroom. But body language is a huge thing, because people can be saying one thing, and with their body, obviously they're telling you something completely different. So it's important to pay attention to that. Women are great at giving us feedback. They do it the best. Item D, the world is feeding information back to us. Letter E, catch the feedback and interpret it accurately. This is vitally important. This is where leaders really, really miss the mark, because they are, if they're lucky, catching the feedback, but they're not interpreting it quite accurately. And to do it is a skill. So if you can apply a proper response to feedback, this is an area where you will greatly contribute to your effectiveness, as long as you have the right interpretation. And I will tell you that is extremely hard. That is not an easy thing to do. Everybody wants to be an effective leader, so interpreting the feedback properly is critically important. The wrong interpretation is definitely going to lead to wrong decisions, poor leadership, and you're going to have people saying, what is that guy thinking? That's not at all what I was trying to get across. Where is he coming from? He's coming from Mars. This happens every day. This happens a lot with our children. So, item 2, seeing the importance of feedback and disclosure. Under A, we need to be receptive to feedback in all its forms. We need to catch and notice feedback. We should be students of the little obvious things, especially of our followers' behavior. And a lot of times that's what it is. It is the small and obvious things that we are oblivious to, or we don't have interest in, or we're just too busy to pay attention, so we don't. because we're running around in our own world. We really need to be studious and observant of this and see what's going on around us, what's in our surroundings, what's in our environment. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Be observant of the impact those things have on an organization we are trying to lead. You know, men are very, very observant of the opposite sex, I can tell you that. We don't miss a thing. You girls open a little door, a little crack, whatever it is, and men are highly sensitive and all over it. So, you know, when it comes to the male and the female relationship, I can tell you, body language, different things, you know, your eyes, your flip of your hair and all that, men are catching all that. So it's one of the most classic examples that this guy actually talks about. But one of the ones that I thought of, I worked with some guys from Israel who were in the military, and they were in a very special unit. And they were basically trained assassins, is what they were. And they were brainwashed. I mean, they were really, really brainwashed. And they lived their entire life that way, their personal life, private lives, you know, with their families and everything. If we walked into a restaurant, he could tell you where everybody was sitting and what they were wearing in a matter of seconds. And he couldn't get that out of his head. He just lived that way. And these guys are highly trained to be perceptive. And for them, again, this feedback that they're getting with their surrounding and their environment and what happens to them and for him, and he would tell us some stories, meant life or death. So, and if they're interpreting that feedback the wrong way, it could mean someone's life. So these military guys, these guys who are, you know, these special forces were highly, highly trained in this area. And they really, really spent a lot of time on receiving the feedback and trying to interpret it properly so that they could make the right decisions. Because usually they were making decisions that could be lethal. One of the things that, I guess as a personal example I could give, I skipped a whole page of notes, look at that. We'd have been out of here a lot earlier, huh? And we're going to spend a little bit of time here, so relax. And I don't believe there's much notes here past B. So B is interpret feedback as accurately as possible. Under A, the very stuff of leadership is both the perception and interpretation of feedback. So again, they're talking throughout this whole time about how you perceive things, how you take that, you digest it, and how you interpret it. Under B, you must develop an appreciation for feedback. That's really an important point because a lot of people overlook that, and it's the way you handle and interact with your colleagues and so forth that can make a huge difference. But if you learn to really appreciate their feedback and if they're honest and open with you, it can help you make a lot of really good decisions. You know, great leaders, and I think, you know, in this room probably most of you went through Ronald Reagan's presidency. He was an incredible president. He was a very good orator, he was a very good speaker and so forth. But he did something that was very, very smart. He surrounded himself with an incredible cabinet that did some of the most amazing things here. He decided he wanted to put missiles in Europe, and everybody in Europe shut him down. Said, no, you're not going to do that. So he went to Germany. He said, hey, 1944, we signed this pact. It's still active today. I'm putting my missiles in Germany. So he put missiles in Germany. And up to his time, it was always tit for tat. The Russians would build a big missile and a bigger rocket, and the Americans would say, okay, we have to counteract that. And we'd build a bigger one and everything so we could shoot that out of the sky. And it would go back and forth, and it always did this all the way until his presidency. And then he created this thing called Star Wars. And he said, I'm going to create a blanket over the United States, okay, and over our oceans and everything, that whatever you shoot up in the air, we'll be able to shoot it out from space. Originally, it wasn't true. Originally, it was all a bunch of talk. It was Star Wars. That's what it was. But he developed it, and he commissioned people to do that, and they did that. And that's when everything in the world changed. That's when you saw Russia and Germany, and everything began to change because it was no longer this tit for tat anymore. So he was one of our one of the greatest leaders that you could see that, did a really, really good job with that. It's again, when you're getting this feedback, if you're becoming defensive about your poor policies or things that you implemented, or you're hung up on a lane position and, that could never ever work, and you never get to a place to be really effective because you're in a defensive mode instead of in a mode of, okay, these guys are giving me good information and I trust that. And Reagan was one of the guys that did that. I will tell you that, especially in your work and your business of employment, people hire you for your area of expertise. So we do construction and we work for owners and developers, and you have a developer who knows about development, and he hires a leasing person who knows about the market, because he doesn't know what the market is. He doesn't know what to build. So he gets leasing and real estate information. Okay, what should we be building? Then he hires architects and contractors. And most of the time, probably 90% of the time, they go with their gut instinct and their gut feeling. You guys here, we call that the Holy Spirit. We get this little thing in our gut and we say, okay, well, that's the Holy Spirit talking to us. But they surround themselves with all these people and all these experts to get their opinions so that they can make a proper business decision. And that's why they do it. So I can't tell you how many boardrooms I sat in where the owners of the company sat there and, well, we're going to paint the building pink. And there's a bunch of yes men. Yes, yeah, pink, that's a great color, let's paint it pink. That's not what they're looking for. That's not what your employer is looking for. He's looking for you to be deadly honest and give you your expert opinion, whatever that is. Kurt's an IT guy. I have no idea about computers other than to turn them on and the programs work. But if they didn't and they crashed, I'd have to call Kurt because he's an expert in that area. But that's typically what your employers and people that you're working for or anybody in a leadership position, what they want. They don't want a bunch of yes people. Okay, I'm going to give you some personal and some business experience along these lines. This is really for you younger couples who are here. I'm definitely not smarter than you, but you can learn from wisdom. I will tell you that my greatest disappointment in my life, my greatest failure by far, trumps everything, okay, was my marriage. Okay, I was married for quite some time. I do not believe in divorce. I still don't believe in it, but I'm separated. So, and this is the greatest disappointment to me. But it's something, unfortunately, that I'm learning to live with, and life goes on and you do things. But marriage is never a 50-50 thing. You go into marriage and, okay, well, it's supposed to be 50-50. There's no such thing as a 50-50 marriage. And if you talk to some of the people in this room, and for you younger couples, it's good to partner up with some of the more seasoned people and couples here because you can learn from them. It's always 60-40. It's always, oh, how do I look? It's always you feel that you're given 60%, but you're only getting back 40. And your partner feels the same way. She or he feels, okay, well, I'm giving 60% to this relationship and I'm only getting back 40. And it's the big things that happen in your life together as a couple, you guys will get over. You guys will tackle them and you'll deal with them, whatever they are. It's a death, it's an illness, it's a car accident, whatever the big, crises are, you seem to unite couples and they come together and you get over that together as a group and it feels good. It feels nice. It's the real little things. It's the small things. It's like a boiler. And the pressure builds up and builds up and builds up. And, you could be married 7 years and you forget to take out the trash and all of a sudden here's your wife and she comes walking in and she's like, I can't believe it. You forgot to take out the darn trash. You're always working late. You're never home. I got to take the kids to practice. I got to fix the dinner. There's never enough time. And you're thinking like, this witch spelled with a B is, flipping out over some trash. I mean, what the heck? I mean, it's a little bit of trash. What's the big deal? That's not the point. What you have to do is you have to be able to interpret that feedback that you're getting from her. And you have to see all the 4 or 5 things that she threw out there, what's really, really bugging her. It ain't the trash. Okay, she's saying, hey, I need help. she ain't saying I want you home and I want to be all cuddly. She's saying, I need help at home. I need help with the kids. So for you men, again, it's not the big things, it's the little things that you need to pay attention to, because it's like a boiler. All of a sudden, it's like, well, it's the trash was just the thing that blew the lid off the boiler. That's all it was. So pay attention to that. But that's the tricky part. The tricky part is, okay, she just vomited out all this stuff, this dragon breathed all this fire all over me over not taking out the trash, but that's not what it was. And I need to decipher and I need to interpret, what's really, really bugging her. And hopefully you can, narrow it down and say, okay, I see you need some help, and, you take care of that. You talk about sex, this is the love month, okay? And that's a very important topic as well for you young couples. When does sex for a woman begin? Okay, you don't have to answer that. It begins the moment she wakes up. The moment she wakes up in the morning. For men, it isn't like that. For us, it's the end of the day, whatever. We may think about it throughout the day, every 10 seconds or something, but, for us, it's the end of the day, it's the end of the work day, and that's it. But for a woman, it's different. It's very different because they're wired differently. I had a friend that every morning he'd wake up, and he was up before his wife, so he went out the door before her, and he would leave her toothbrush with toothpaste on it every single morning. Okay? And again, it's not what he was saying, but it's the deeds of what he was doing. So every morning when she got out of bed, that's one of the first things she saw. Hey, my husband thought about me. There's my toothbrush with my toothpaste. Now imagine, 5 years go by, 10 years go by, and he forgets to do it one day. That's a problem. Because his wife, she's going to interpret that. And she's going to say, uh-oh, what did I do? I did something wrong. My toothbrush isn't here, and what happened? And in reality, he was just in a hurry that day and had to really run out, and he was, nothing really happened. But again, it's a good example of taking the feedback and interpreting it wrongly. So it's doing the little things. And I would tell you guys that it's important to pay attention to them. It's important to, open the door, carry the groceries, carry the laundry, make her a cup of coffee, make her breakfast, leave her a little note. I used to carry a note in my wallet, and it was from my father. And I was young, I just got out of college, and I had started my career. It was the first job I had. And he left in the morning before I did. And so as I was making my breakfast, I saw this little note written on a small piece of paper. And it was just a note of encouragement from him, and telling me how proud he was of me, and that I finished school, and I'm headed down the path of my career and doing what I wanted to do. And so, but it really, really warmed my heart. It really encouraged me, really made me feel good that, my dad thought about me that morning and wrote me that note. And I kept it in my wallet. And I'll never forget when they broke into my car, and like an idiot, typical, it was the female side of me. I left my wallet and everything in the car. So they took my checkbooks, they took my wallet, they did all that stuff. And I remember saying to my wife, the first thing that came to my mind is, wow, I'm never going to read that note again. I didn't care about my credit cards or the money, because that was all replaceable. My dad had died, and he was deceased, so I was never going to read that note again. So it's the small things, and it's not what you say, because you can say, I love you, but if you don't ever show it, if you don't ever do anything, then what does it really mean? So I told you weren't going to have to take a lot of notes in this part. Okay, your children. I can only give you my personal experiences, and this is a funny one. When it came to disciplining my children, it's the last thing a guy wants to hear when he comes home is, your wife meets you at the door, and I had 3 boys, and here it is, and they did this, they did that, and blah, you're just getting like an earful. So, and men don't want to hear that. I can tell you, men coming home, that's not what they want to hear. So I had a system for disciplining my children that, okay, I would send them to my bedroom, and this is I don't know, you may think this is, psychotic or sick, but it worked for me. I'd send them to my bedroom, and I'd make them wait. So they'd sit on the bed, and they may wait 10 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes, and so they're in there, they're panicking. They're like thinking the whole time of the scenario that they did something bad at school, or they beat up their brother, whatever they did. So they're sitting there and panicking. And I'm giving you this example. It's a good example, and you'll see why. So I would go into the room, I'd sit down, they'd stand in front of me, and I'd say, okay, tell me what you did. And of course, this took some time for them to tell me. I knew the real story. So they would tell me what they did, and we'd talk about it, and I would explain to them, okay, this is why your mother's all pissed off now. This is why you ticked her off. This is why your teacher is this. This is why, and so forth. And I explained it to them so that they would understand. And then I would ask them to repeat back to me what they heard. And say, okay, now tell me what you just heard. And I can tell you, never, ever, not one time were they able to repeat it back. They missed it. They totally missed the point that I was trying to make with them. And so I realized, okay, if they missed it, it's for one of two reasons. It's either they're mentally challenged, which they're not, or I didn't explain it very well. So I need to go over it again. And I would. But it was an amazing lesson to me, because I could never figure out. At the end of the little chat and everything, we get to understanding, okay, then they usually got the belt. And I would tell them, that's to remind you of what you did so you don't do it again. Sometimes they didn't get the belt. Sometimes they got a hug and a kiss. So it depended on the situation. So I could never figure out, did they not understand because they were so apprehensive and fearful, like, okay, now I'm going to have to bend over and he's going to beat me with the belt. And this is all they're thinking of, and it's fear running through their mind, or they actually didn't really understand it. So, but it was a good lesson as far as feedback and interpretation. And I can tell you, my kids never got it. It was a remarkable, I just never understood in all the years. I mean, obviously, as they grew up and became 11 and 12 and 13, I didn't beat my kids with a belt anymore. I could reason with them at that age. A couple things in as far as business examples that you may be able to use. If you have a group and they're not cutting the mustard and they're not getting the job done, what are you going to do? You give them an ultimatum. Hey, you either do it or, there's the door. How do we all act to ultimatums? We don't take them very good. We get extremely defensive right away. So it's not a good way to handle it. If you go in there, you tell your team, hey, we're not meeting our quota, we're not, our sales are down, or whatever it is that you're doing, and you ask them, what do we need to do to turn it around? What do we have to do, to go from this to that? What's necessary? Now you put the ball in their court, and that's where you want the ball. That's where you want to keep it. So when you talk to them about that, and you listen to their ideas, you listen to their concepts, and then you ask a simple question, okay, you got all the tools to implement that? Can you do that? And typically they'll say yes, or maybe I need this, or maybe I need that. And then you do the follow-up. When you say, okay, next Tuesday I'll be back to check on it. So they know now that we've talked about this issue, we've discussed how we're going to attack it, it may work, it may not work, but they know you're going to come back. They know that you're going to come back, and you're going to follow up with them. I remember when I was young, I was about 23 years old. I was working for a developer. I had no idea, no clue what I was doing. But I had an incredible, incredible teacher. And I made $1 million mistake. It took me all day to walk into his office and tell him, hey, I blew this bid by $1 million. So, because I felt about this big. It was my mistake. So I walked in, I sat down, and he must have been able to see on my face that I was very nervous and apprehensive. And I said, Bob, this is what happened, and this is what I did, and this is how I made the mistake. And you forget 1-0, and you got a big mistake. And his response, he was very calm, and he was very cool. I mean, he could have bit my head off. He could have done a lot of different things. He could have reacted very harshly there. But I'll never forget it. And I used it in my life and later on in my career as well. He said, okay, sit down, and we're going to figure out how we take $1 million mistake and make it 100,000. And at the end of 3 hours, we were able to do that. That exact same thing happened to me on a bid in Jacksonville where the estimator did the same thing. Forgot a zero, and We got the job because of that mistake, and it was a government job, so you couldn't back out of it. But on one thing, it was a blessing, because it was a very good job and we did very well. But going into it, we were fearful. So again, it was a very good thing as far as the feedback and interpretation there. The general here, General Perry, does a really, really good job with this in the book. I don't know if you guys read this last chapter, I think it was chapter 10, but he talks about it, and he does a nice job with it. He talks about his failures in this chapter, and he talks about the lessons that he learned from his failures. And one of those lessons is he was the assistant to the Deputy Secretary of Defense at the time, and apparently this guy must have been like a real horse's platoon. And after about 10 months, he got fired, and he got shipped overseas to Europe and to take care of maintenance for F-16s. So he thought at that time this was the end of his military career. He would never, ever get another promotion. He would never, that was it. He was done. He was finished. And he had to prepare his family and his kids to go to Europe. And in turn, everybody else, all the other generals that were there, looked at it as a promotion for him, because they realized that the Secretary of Defense was a real jerk and was in a position he shouldn't have been in. And they said, okay, this guy must have some real mustard, some real honor, because he got fired and he was dismissed from this job, so it says something about him and about his character. And they promoted him when he was in Europe to brigadier general, and he became a general there. So he talks about these lessons, but he talks about his failures and what he's learned from them. And the one thing that he says there is, we shouldn't take criticism personal. Okay, how you not do that, I don't know. Because most of us take criticism very, very personal, because people are criticizing what we're doing and our work and the things that, our hard efforts. So how you don't take it personal, again, that's difficult. But if you surround yourself with the right people and you're getting good advice from them and people that have an undue influence on you and you can trust them, then, he talks about this, not to take it personal. People don't look at leaders as people. They don't look at them as a person. They look at them as a symbol. They look at them as an institution. And that's very true. You look at CEOs and presidents and, President of the United States and things like that. We really don't look at them as a person. We do look at them as a symbol, as an institution. School teachers are a classic example of this. When you're younger and you're going through school, your teacher isn't a real person. That's somebody else. That's somebody special to you at that point in time in your life, especially when you're younger. Ken Blanchard wrote this: feedback is the breakfast of champions. If you want to be successful as a leader, you must develop an appreciation for feedback and all of its subtle and seemingly imperceptible forms. You must pay attention to it. And we do this every day. You're on the phone and you're done. You're talking and you're talking and you're done. You're done with the conversation. And the other person isn't getting the feedback because you're giving these little answers. Yeah, okay, right. You're done. Your conversation is over. But they're not getting it. They're not, they don't understand it. And again, it's the misinterpretation of the feedback that they're taking from you. They think you're still engaged in this conversation, and for you it's long over. One of my favorite negotiation tools that we use, and David Martinez likes this one as well, is we use a negotiation tactic called a silent game. The first time I used it, I was actually in Europe, and I was checking into a hotel, and they said, well, we don't have your reservation. I said, okay. So, you fly all this way, and, it's a long flight. So I said, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this tool, the silent game. And the trick is you just be quiet. Okay? So the young lady said, we don't have your reservation. It's not here. It's not in the computer. So I pulled out my little reservation, and I handed it to her. And it was there, my confirmation number and everything. So she's typing all kinds of stuff in there and all that. And finally she says, okay, well, we did find a room, but it's a room we normally don't rent. And it's, back all the way down the end of this hallway and so forth. And I'm just deadpan quiet. I'm not saying a word. And she's just looking at me, and she's typing some more. And I'm not saying anything. So she says, well, we're going to throw in, your meals. Your meals will be all included. I don't even know if there's a restaurant in the hotel, or I even want to eat in this restaurant, okay? I have no idea. So I'm not saying one word. By the time we got done, and I never said nothing, I took my keys and I walked away. We stayed in the suite. They paid for all our meals, okay? And I was laughing all the way to the suite because I thought, this is a great tool. This is unbelievable. This works so good. Because what happens is people are taking your feedback and they're misinterpreting it, their perception, and they negotiate with themselves. And if you try this, you will see people will negotiate with themselves, especially car dealers. They'll start throwing in things like the floor mats and the XM radio and things like this. And they're going to start throwing, because they don't know what you're thinking. And they're looking at you and they're saying, well, what's he disclosing to me? What is it? They have no idea. So that's a silent game. It's actually a very good tool. You just have to know the right place to use it. Okay, item C. You are also in the system. Your answer there is system. A lot of feedback that you're going to receive is about you and your policies, your position that you hold. So pay attention to them. Item D. Your feedback is the most important feedback you will receive as a leader. Always remember what I call the golden rule, I know it's not, is that you reap what you sow. Your children, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, are a mirror of you. They are a direct reflection of you. When you look at your children, if they are mean and angry, if they are happy and joyful, that is a reflection of you. Because they're going to learn from you. They're going to imitate you. So if you give them lots of love, and lots of hugs and kisses, and you are kind and generous and gentle with them, what do you think you're going to get in return? Some angry lunatic maniac? No. But if you're evil, if you're selfish, if you're stingy, if you're mean, what do you expect in return? So, again, this is, to me, you reap what you sow. Our children, I believe, are very much a mirror of mom and dad. That's who they're really going to learn from. Item E, all leaders have blind spots. Common blind spots for leaders that we fail to gain an accurate perception of how they come across as leaders to the people they wish to lead. This is the whole thing, everybody, the answer there is how they come across. A leader or the head of a company or the pastor or whatever, they think they're coming across one way, and you guys are sitting there and thinking like, well, you ain't all that. Okay, and they don't get it. They don't understand of how you are coming across or how they are coming across to you. So this is, again, very important. One of the best examples of this are professional coaches that I could think of, because we see them on game day, and we see the football coaches and basketball coaches and all that on their game day. And on that, most of the time the fans will say, I hate that guy, I can't stand that coach, look at the way he acts, look at the things he does on the sideline, this guy's a real jerk. But the coaches aren't concerned about how they come across. They could care less how you perceive them on game day, because that's not important to them. And most of the time we are absolutely wrong about that person, because on game day they have one thing in mind, is how to win the game and their strategy for winning that game. And they may act completely different. And you see this a lot with professional athletes. Some of them won't even go to practice. And they show up to the game, and they are the game. But they don't need to practice. But people are interpreting this, okay? And they're doing it in an incorrect way. And how they come across. I don't know of any professional coach that would, really care of how you or I thought about him on the day of the game. Because we only see him on that day. We never see him on the practice field. We never see him in the classroom. We never see him at the players' homes interacting with their wives and children. We don't get to see all of that. So again, it's another misconception that most of us have. And as a leader, you do need to pay attention of how you come across, especially to the people you're leading, because it's important to them. Item 2, if leaders send mixed or wrong signals, the followers will be confused. If leaders are not communicating clearly or they are poor communications, they will confuse their followers the level of trust is going to diminish, and the followers will begin to question and doubt their leader. Misunderstandings and hurt feelings can grind your productivity to a halt. This is really, I will tell you, things that we take, especially we get our feelings hurt, you can forget about your project getting done on time. You know, it becomes all about that person. So the wrong signals, you know, you're going to confuse these guys. You know, leaders, they're not meeting their goals. They play the blame game. They blame everybody else but them. And it's really their leadership. That's what they need to blame. All right, we said all that to get to this guy's point of the Johari window. Okay? Okay. The Johari window. Johari is the author, two gentlemen, and it's their last names combined. So it's not Arabic or anything of that nature, okay? Okay. The Johari window helps analyze any discrepancy. I don't think you're taking any notes here. I filled it in for you. Helps analyze any discrepancies between a leader's self-perception and the perception others have of that leader. Area number one, this is your public area. This is, you know, things that you know about yourself and everybody else knows about them as well. It's your public life. It's wide open. You know it and they all know it. Area number two, as they describe it, is your private life. This is things that you only know about yourself. It's nobody else's business. It's just you. So, and you don't share it with anyone. Area number three is the blind. This area represents the things in your life, okay, and this is kind of odd. I can't imagine this can happen, but I can go along with it. This area represents the things in life about you that everybody else knows about you, but you ain't got a clue. You don't know it, but everybody else does. Okay, now that's pretty scary. Okay? So, because people are judging you or making, preconceived notion about you, and they know something about you that you don't. So that kind of would scare me. And this is what he calls to as your blind area. That's area number three. You got little flaws, little, faults, little things that drive people crazy all the time, and nobody's telling you. So this is the area that we've been talking about, and everybody else sees it but you. Area number four is unknown. This is the evil area. This is the dark side of you. Everybody has it. Okay, so don't try to hide it. You all got it, including me. This is the area where, all of a sudden something comes up, and you are taken by surprise with it. So you're driving down the street, and some woman cuts you off, and the next thing you know, you're cussing her out, and you're chasing her down to and you are coming out of your skin. And it's like, wow, where did that come from? Like I didn't know I had that in me. Where's that coming from? So this is the area that he's calling the unknown. Now, all leaders have all four of these areas, and you need to contend with them on your personal and your professional life. Nobody's that perfect. We all have a dark side. Nobody's that meticulous. Nobody's that smart where you don't have a blind side and you don't need to deal with it. Item B, feedback reduces the blind areas in our life. So I'll give you an example. When we did presentations, me and one of my other partners, the first thing we did after our presentations that we were making is we critiqued each other. And we critiqued each other for the good and the bad. Mainly the bad. We didn't care about the good. It didn't matter. The good was the good, so who cares? Why focus on that? What did we do bad? And one of the things that he told me in early presentations, he says, listen, you say the word you know all the time. Every sentence, well, and again, this was a blind area for me. Okay? So I didn't know that I did that. I had no idea that I was repeating this word. But everybody listening was driving them absolutely nuts. I mean, they couldn't stand to listen to the presentation because I kept saying, And he told me, you need to eliminate that from your vocabulary which I did, I hope. So, when we get this feedback, and this is the whole point of their chart, as we get feedback here, and this is feedback. So we're getting this feedback from all these people. And as I'm getting feedback, okay, from my blind area, and that was definitely a blind area, I had no idea I was doing that, okay, now that became public. That became something in the known. My blind area is now diminishing, okay, because I took that out of my vocabulary. And when I was doing my presentations and things of that, I was very conscious of that. It was very bothersome to me because I had to always think about it for a while, and hopefully I lost it. So as you get your feedback, you're going to see that your blind area now, things that you did not know about yourself, but everybody else knew, is going to shrink. Item C, disclosure is not what we say, but what we do. This is our deeds, what we do, not what we are saying. If you notice how when we're disclosing, again, it's shrinking. As we come over this side, this is disclosure. This is your disclosure area here. And as we start to disclose things about our private life, as we start to open up more, as we start to become more public with our private things that we only kept to ourselves, that we only knew, we start to go into this area as well. And what happens is our public life is now becoming greater. And our blind side is shrinking. And not only that, but we get a little bonus, we get a little benefit because this unknown area is starting to be crossed into as well. And we're starting to take care of some of these unknowns as well. Now, I believe that that's very true. I believe that the more public we are, the purer we are. You know, it's kind of like the old saying, you don't have to have a good memory if you never lie. But if you're lying, you know what it is. It leads from one lie to another lie, and before you know it, there's 3 or 4 lies, and you got to have a really, really good memory of what you told this person and that person and so forth. So this is their concept. And so as we're doing this and we're shrinking our private life, we're shrinking our blind side, you know, we're basically getting rid of the skeletons. You know, they're coming out of our life. And the more public you are, the purer your life is going to be. You know, I mean, the best examples that we have is Pastor Steve and Pastor Mary. I mean, they're not perfect people by no means, but when it comes to being pure and living, you know, righteously, you know, by God, they're pretty good at it. I don't know anybody better. So, item D, inappropriate disclosure. Does everybody get this? Because this was the whole point of their all's lesson, okay, was this disclosure, yes.
Under B, it says feedback reduces
The-
blind areas of our life.
Yes.
There says feedback makes the blind areas of your life
Smaller. It makes it smaller, it shrinks it. So here, as you're getting feedback, and the only example I could come up with was the stuff when we did presentations and we're critiquing ourselves was very good. You know, as I was getting that feedback, my blind side, things I didn't know about myself, which I didn't think could be true, because I'm a jerk, okay? You know, you actually start shrinking that area, and you become more public. So that is their point, as far as, you know, this whole Johari window. So get the feedback, get the proper interpretation. You're going to start shrinking your blind area. You know, and again, this is something that the general talks about in his book, and I think he makes a really, really good point. If you're going to do this with your mate, you're going to do this with your friends, you're going to do this with the people who you are closest with and you can trust, don't get all defensive about the criticism. You know, maybe do something different and take it like, hey, that guy loves me enough or cares about me enough that he's, you know, showing me my faults or some things that I didn't know about myself, and I need to fix them. I need to correct them. I can tell you that Pastor Steve is very good at doing that with his inner circle. When we are out of line and we, are doing things that he doesn't perceive as, hey, you're going down the right path, he gently pulls us aside and lets us know. He doesn't yell and scream and get all bent out of shape, but, he opens our eyes a little bit. And maybe it's something that we didn't see it that way. But because he's a very public figure, it's always on his mind. It's always on his mind of how am I being perceived? How is it that people are going to interpret this? And he's got to be careful. And likewise, people who work in this church and the staff and the administration, that's a tremendous amount of pressure. This is not an easy place to work. This is a really, really hard place because your life and all your ducks have got to be in a row. Otherwise, you can't work here. You cannot be here. And the people who work here know that. So, okay, we're on D, right? Inappropriate disclosure. Okay, as a general rule, a leader should be as open and predictable as possible. Followers will have more trust and confidence when they know where the leader stands or what he or she believes. People don't like to be surprised. There's times when, and you just got to use common sense, when full disclosure isn't appropriate. It's just not. It's a matter of the situation. There's also a timing of when you disclose information. There was a time when we were trying to, buy a building, and we went and we found our first building, and it was a disaster. It was sinking, and it was held up with cables. And so, we're a bunch of goofballs, and me and David and Pastor, and we're there, and we got the contract, and Jonathan's got his whole film crew there, and they're filming and all this, and we're making a big, these people must have thought we were crazy. So we have it on video, and we're going to disclose this to the congregation on Sunday. And we make this big disclosure. Okay? Our timing was way bad. We never bought the building. And then on the second building that we did, and we looked, and we got the contracts, we said, no cameras. We don't want any cameras. I think we used cell phone pictures. We did the cell phone thing. And that went away. By the third or fourth thing, we learned our lesson as far as timing and when to disclose information. We shut up. We did not say a word. It took us forever to negotiate this building and sign this contract with this owner. And I bet the guys that we would not close. And it came down literally to the last day. And I remember standing on Brickell in the attorney's office and looking down, and there we saw the little squirrel and his attorney walking down Brickell, and we could not believe it. And even at the closing table, he tried to wiggle out of it. So, but it was then, once the deal was inked, that we said, now our timing is good. So you have to also be careful. Not only sometimes is it inappropriate, but your timing could be really, really bad. So you need to be, conscious of that as well. Item 4, seeing ourselves as our followers do. Leaders need to take the time to self-evaluate and look at how they come across to others, which none of us ever really do because we just don't spend time on evaluating ourselves and how we're coming across and how people are perceiving us. Letter A, leaders should be intentional. If you're not intentional, you are definitely losing some of your effectiveness. Letter B, leadership flows from being. Leadership flows from within. So know as much of yourself as possible, especially your shortcomings and your weaknesses. We spend, a lot of time usually ignoring our strengths. If we're really, really good in one area, we don't pay any attention to it because we're good at it. We don't need to. We don't need to perfect it. We don't need to work on it. I'm good at that. And we look at what's our weak points. And we spend a lot of time trying to get our weak points just up to par. And I would tell you, forget your weak points. You are wasting your time working on them. You cannot be an expert on everything. I hate accounting and finance. I cannot stand it. And I don't touch it. And David Martinez will tell you, I never, ever look at accounting in our company, ever. Because it is something that I don't have the stomach for. For him, it's second nature. So I'm not going to spend time, valuable time, trying to learn and work on something that I can't stand to do, which is accounting. It's a waste of my time. I'd rather focus on my strengths, and I'd rather keep staying with them and perfecting them, because that's where you're going to excel. If you got to spend time working on your weaknesses, you know inside you hate that. You don't want to do it. You're forcing yourself to do it. You're going against your natural grain. Why do it? You know, I got Knucklehead here. He does it. So, and he's great at it. He's excellent. So when Mondo worked with us and we were on job sites, I didn't go to job sites. I didn't have to go micromanage and sit there and say, hey, are we doing this, doing that, whatever. No. He's good at that. He was good. You know, I don't need to do that. So, item C, feedback you receive from people you lead is your feedback. If you don't have good feedback, you are flying blind. It's really, really important, especially from people that you can trust and you don't have to second guess. And do they have an underlying reason as to why they're telling you something? Do they have another agenda? And if you're getting information and feedback from somebody and you have to second guess that and say, you know, why and what's their agenda, and they have an alternative motive, forget it. Don't do it. Do it from people that you can trust and you have confidence in. I will tell you that pastors here fly blind almost 99% of the time. That is probably one of the toughest areas for them to get feedback, because they don't get good feedback. Number one, I believe that nobody tells them what a good job they're doing or a bad job or what's going on here. You can imagine the conversation of Pastor Steve and Pastor Mary on the ride home. Pastor has got to be grilling her. How was I? How did I do? What did you think of that? What, you know, because nobody's giving him feedback. And if you were to come and give him feedback, he's probably going to think it's just wishy-washy. You're being a nice girl, and you're just being polite and courteous and telling me, nice job, Pastor. Pastors don't need that. But they really, and especially from you guys sitting here, they need your honest opinion. And it goes back to leaders surrounding themselves with really good people and experts that they can trust. And if they're doing something stupid, or they're doing something that's foolish, or they're doing something that's great and it's remarkable and it really does touch you, you should let them know. You should be sincere about it, because they need that. Because when does a pastor get feedback? Okay, more people are coming to the church, and now instead of 500, there's 1,000 people. There's 3,000. They don't know if they're doing a good job. A lot of people come to church, they're forced to come. A lot of people come out of tradition, because I grew up in church, so I'm going to go to church. You know, couldn't tell you what the pastor's preaching about, but I'm going to show up. So it's really important. I think this is a good area, and they talk about, you know, receiving this feedback, and it is your feedback, and if you don't get it, you are flying blind. I think our pastors fly blind a lot. I think that's true of all pastors, though. You know, for a teacher, it's much easier. A teacher can very, very quickly judge what type of job he or she is doing by the grades that their students are getting. If everybody's flunking the class, you think it's all the students that have a problem, or you think it's the teacher that has a problem? Everybody's not flunking. So the teacher can gauge herself or himself by, how's my class doing? How am I coming across to them? And that's the feedback they get. Letter D, self-insights can prevent problems. Socrates says, the unexamined life is not worth living. So it goes back to the same thing that he's been talking about of, you know, doing self-examination. And item E, self-insight is crucial for every leader.